We have these things called parametric constraints, but how do we use them in our design? Well, that's up to you. You don't even have to use them at all. We've been making designs without parametric constraints for years now in CAD, but other programs, other CAD software uses constraints extensively. Now that AutoCAD has them, you have that option, and they can really help you out. Where you really should use your parametric constraints is in your dynamic blocks. You can use them to really help out and to do a lot of different things. If we open up the tool palettes and we go to the structural tab, let's take a look at one of these beams. Let's look at the WF wide flange beam. Insert it. Well, here's our block, and this block is constrained. You can say show all, but there's nothing to show because it's all inside the block. One of the problems with constraining your design file is that there's a lot of stuff in it. And the more constraints you add to it, the more difficult it can be. Meaning that it can be difficult to work with and difficult to use. Now you have the little things here and there in AutoCAD that says, hey, look, you're going to over constrain this, or hey, you can't move this object the way you want to. Can we relax these constraints for you? You can do that, but after a while, it gets really hard to work with. And that's because your file gets larger and larger and bigger and bigger. It keeps going. It's infinite in size, potentially. But a block is finite in design. There's only so much there. All we have here are a couple parallel lines and some fillets. So if we select this block, right-click in it, and go to the block editor, lo and behold, what we see here is constraints. This is a fully constrained block. Now, if we start looking at some of these, we see coincidence here on these endpoints. So it's keeping all the lines touching. Everywhere a line or an arc comes in contact with the other one, we have that constraint. So these lines are not going to separate. So, well, why not use a polyline? Well, because a polyline will behave a little bit differently in the constraints than a regular line work will. I know it doesn't seem like it would, but it does. Then what we have on here are different dimensional constraints. And you can get to all of these constraints right here in the block editor tab. They're geometric and dimensional. They're all right here. And we've dimensioned just a few things: the overall height or depth of our beam, the width of the flange, the thickness of the flange, the thickness of the web, and then the radius. So every line has a dimension or an equal constraint. So we dimension it one time, and then we make it equal to everything that needs to have the same length. We've done that. Top and bottom, left and right, the web thickness. So we have all of those. And then we take in our parameters manager. And that's this right here. And we just define these sizes. And then once we do that, we set up a lookup table. That's this right here. If you go to your parameters, you just set up your lookup table and apply it. And then that lookup table will have all of these dimensions in it, assuming you assign them. And then you can enter in values. So if I select this here and I open up the block table, this will give you all of the different parameters. We've added everything to it: the depth, the thickness of the web, the flange width, and the flange thickness. We've given it a size, and these are the items that you'll pick from on your lookup table. And then each of these are just applied. I don't have to redraw these. I don't have to create visibility states for each one. Using the constraints and the lookup table, I'm able to create as many different variations on this as I can come up with. So using constraints inside a block can help you to create this entire list of different options for your block very quickly. If I look at the properties table, this is what we were able to do. That's pretty cool. So remember, managing your constraints inside your file can be difficult, and we're going to talk about that here in a second. So using constraints inside a block, especially a dynamic block, is always a great idea. It will lock your geometry into place for you, and you won't have to apply as many different settings or stretching or rotation, etc. You can do more with less.